This is going to be covering the chapter 2 and half of section 1 titled Early Agriculture. Please open your textbook to page 82. The key terms we're going to look at today are two words, revolution and domesticate. Please follow along on the screen or on your book. People of the Paleolithic era, or Old Stone Age, lived as hunter-gatherers. They could not have imagined many of the things that we now take for granted. People often had to follow herds of animals, so they were unable to settle for long in one place. People could own few possessions, only what they could easily carry. Food supplies were uncertain. Life was short and dangerous. Survival was a full-time job. Hopefully that's something you experienced in the hunter-gatherer simulation. But about 10,000 years ago, life began to change. The changes occurred in many places over a 2,000 to 4,000 year period. We call this period the Neolithic era, or New Stone Age. The prefix neo means new. So we were in the Paleolithic era, the Old Stone Age with hunter-gatherers, and now we're heading to the New Stone Age, the Neolithic era. During this period, people learned how to farm. In time, most hunter-gatherers stopped wandering in search of food and settled in one place. So they stopped being nomads. They settled in one place. Life was still difficult, and survival was still the main concern. But with people staying in one place, the world began to take on many features we recognize today. In fact, the shift from hunting to farming was so important that historians call it the Neolithic agricultural, meaning farming, revolution, change. A revolution is a complete change in ways of thinking, working, or living. That's our vocab word. Revolution, a complete change in ways of thinking, working, or living. We've entered the Neolithic agricultural or farming revolution. The birth of farming. The last ice age ended about 12,000 years ago. Slowly, temperatures increased and rainfall patterns changed. Glaciers that had covered so much of Earth began to shrink. As ice from the glaciers melted, ocean levels rose. Switch sides in my book. Most plants and animals adapted to these changes. Adapted is a vocab word from our last section. Fir trees, which could survive cold weather, spread north into once icy regions. Some large ice age animals did not adapt to a warmer world, and many species died out. People who had hunted some of these animals for food had to find something else to eat. Some people adapted to these changes by searching for new sources of food. They found smaller animals to hunt. People living near rivers or lakes began to depend more on fishing. Next section is called modifying the environment. That's like adapting the environment around you to fit you. Others learned to modify or change their environment so that it would provide more food. For example, people cleared trees and bushes by setting them on fire. The grasses that grew back attracted grazing animals such as deer. People may have also noticed that if seeds were scattered on the ground, new plants grew there the next year. This discovery led them to find ways to encourage the growth of wild food and plants. Domesticating plants and animals. Over time, people learned to domesticate plants and animals, especially those that they used for food. To domesticate, vocab word, to domesticate means to change the growth of plants or behavior of animals in ways that are useful for humans. Domesticate, change the growth of plants, behavior of animals, this is useful for humans. Widespread domestication marks the birth of farming. Before we go to the next paragraph, let's take a look at this large visual on the right-hand side. Here we have these animals that were domesticated and plants. So we see that dogs were the first animals domesticated some 20,000 to 15,000 years ago. And then we can see other rice 11,000 years ago when other plants and animals were domesticated so that they were changed to help humans. Even before the agricultural revolution, wild wolves developed into dogs, which humans then domesticated. Dogs provided help in the hunt as well as companionship and protection. Go to page 84. Domesticated plants or crops became a nutritious and reliable source of food. Reliable, meaning dependable or steady, not risky. Grains such as wheat, rice, or maize became chief food sources for entire societies. Maize is similar to corn. Many animals also provided food, not only meat, but eggs, milk, and even honey. Horses and oxen became work animals. Sheep and llamas had coats of hair that were used to make clothing. At first, there was little difference between wild and domesticated breeds, but over time, people selected the seeds of the plants that produced the best crops to sow again. As a result, domesticated plants began to produce more abundant food of higher quality. A wild tomato, for example, is the size of a cherry, but a domesticated tomato is the size of an orange. By contrast, some breeds of domesticated goats, pigs, and cattle are smaller than their wild ancestors. Smaller animals may have been easier to manage. New tools. Farmers invented new tools. They used axes to cut down trees for farmland and sickles to harvest grain crops. The grain was then ground into flour with stone querns or hand mills. All of these tools were at first made out of stone. As later people developed new technologies, they created more efficient tools from materials such as bronze and iron. That is why historians refer to different stages of early history as the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. The spread of farming. No one knows for sure where people first began to plant seeds for food. Still, archaeologists have found evidence to suggest where farming began and how it spread. They have also learned something about the way people lived in early farming communities. The first centers of agriculture. Most historians believe that about 10,000 years ago, southwestern Asia became the first center of agriculture. There, scientists have unearthed seeds from domesticated wheat plants that were buried long ago. The seeds are similar to wild varieties of wheat that still grow in the area. As the map above suggests, farming may have spread from southwestern Asia westward into Africa. It may also have spread northward into Europe and eastward into the Indus River Valley of South Asia. So if we look at our map, they're telling us that it may have spread from southwestern Asia. So let's see, never eat sour worms. So southwestern Asia would be this part of Asia, southwestern Asia. This farming started here and spread into Africa. May have also then spread into Europe, may have spread into the Indus River Valley. The map also shows that other centers of agriculture appeared independently in different areas of the world. In southwestern Asia, for example, farming began when people started to plant wheat and barley. These crops then spread to Egypt. So if we're here planting that, Egypt is here. Oh, sorry, that was hard to see. So if we're here in Southwest Asia, Egypt is right here in Africa. These crops then spread to Egypt. In the southern part of present-day China, farming began with the domestication of rice. So China is in here, domestication of rice. Farther to the north, a grain called millet was the first crop to be domesticated. Farming in the Americas started with the domestication of gourds in present-day Mexico. So right in here, present-day Mexico. In South America, people learned to grow potatoes, beans, and squash. In Africa, farming began with crops such as sorghum and yams. All right, one last section. We're done for part one. Cost and benefits of farming. In every place that agriculture developed, the transition from hunting and gathering to farming took place gradually over a long period of time. Each way of life had costs as well as benefits. Benefits meaning a favorable result, positive, good things. costs and benefits. Some of the costs to shifting to agriculture were clear. First, planting crops and herding animals took a great deal of time and energy. Second, farming was uncertain. If a year's crops failed due to bad weather or disease, a family might starve. Third, farming could be dangerous. Evidence suggests that bands of nomads sometimes attacked farmers and stole their food. Agriculture also offered many benefits. Farming produced more food and required less land than hunting and gathering. An early farm family might need only 6 to 7 acres of land to raise enough wheat or maize, corn, to feed themselves for a year. In contrast, a hunter-gatherer family needed about 20,000 acres on which to find enough food for a year. So 6 to 7 if you're farming, 20,000 if you're a hunter-gatherer. As a result of agriculture or farming, more people were able to build permanent homes and farming villages. Farming also provided new sources of material for clothing. Later in the section, you will read more about new types of shelter and clothing that were invented during the Neolithic era. Some groups tried farming for a time and then returned to hunting and gathering. But in the end, most people chose to remain farmers.